Xbox exclusives going to other platforms? The community is a little bit angry. Xbox exclusives, my friends. Xbox and exclusives. You buy a console because you can only play a game on a particular platform. And so that is what the old school gaming mentality has been, right? The only reason I owned an original Xbox, that huge VCR looking thing that was the size of a football field, was because I could play Halo and I couldn't play that on a Dreamcast, on a PlayStation, or a Nintendo. And that is how I like my exclusives. Well, friends, it seems like the industry is really starting to evolve here, especially from Microsoft's perspective, right? We're starting to hear rumors, and these rumors are really making some Xbox fans angry. And to some extent, I fully understand. So Steven over at GameFile noted here, he says, according to his sources, Xbox has considered bringing hit Sea of Thieves to PlayStation. Now, Xbox fans are probably a little bit angry by this, and I can rationalize that justification. However, I think we need to take a bigger look at the industry. And it's not just Sea of Thieves, because people could say, well, that's just a one-off. Like, we've seen Minecraft, we've seen Ori, we've seen other things. But there's also things like Hi-Fi Rush is rumored to be headed to the Nintendo Switch. And it really starts to open this door of like, why did I just buy an Xbox console if I could have bought a Switch or a PlayStation and played the games that I wanted to play? It's a very fair and very valid argument, but I want to kind of break things down here because I think we need to understand that the idea of a console exclusive is really starting to change. So I'm going to roll some B-roll here while I dive through some points and try to help you understand where Microsoft is headed with this. So first off, an Xbox exclusive, that term has already evolved significantly from the back, the days I remember of the original Xbox with Halo, because right now you can play an Xbox exclusive title on your console, you can play many of them on your PC, and you can also play some of them through a cloud, which means you can play them on almost any device at the end of the day. I could probably play it you can play it on an iPad if you want. It doesn't really matter. So the narrative that, hey, an Xbox exclusive is only a game that can be played on an Xbox console is really, really starting to melt away. And that is, I think, what we're going to start to see for the longer future, because let's sort of start to understand things like Call of Duty. First off, Microsoft now owns Call of Duty. Call of Duty, according to Activision, has a $300 million annual budget. There is no way that they are ever going to take that off of PlayStation because they have to justify that kind of a budget. And gamer expectations are higher than ever for AAA and Quad A games where their budgets can be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. You have to go broad and you have to be able to justify that investment. Otherwise, why are you making that investment? And it is incredibly risky. A game like Cyberpunk, I think, is a perfect example, coming from a independent, but I would say third-party studio at the end of the day, invested massive amounts of money. And friends, let me tell you, there's a balance sheet that says how much cash we have and when we have to ship the game. And if you run out of cash, you have to ship the game, or you think you're going to run out of cash. Like, Cyberpunk has turned into a good game. Like, they've polished it up, things are good. But at the end of the day, the expectations are so high among gamers that if you don't ship things in a perfect state, you could lose literally hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's a very risky endeavor to take on because you build a product for so many years that you have to hit it perfectly. And Halo Infinite, I think, is a really good example of when things don't go great and it's an exclusive, which really compounds the problem because your sale base is a lot smaller. Now, so does this mean, Brad, are you just trying to lead into the fact that Xbox is going to give up on exclusives? I don't think that's the case. I don't think Microsoft is going to give up on the console exclusive, if you will. But however, it's going to evolve. We already know how one way it's going to evolve in 2024. Microsoft is looking to launch a mobile app store, right? We've already know that this is true. Microsoft has talked about it, at least in the courts, and like we're trying to build up this thing. So again, by the end of this year, my expectation that an Xbox exclusive would be something that is on the Xbox console, it's on Steam, it's on the mobile, and it's also in cloud. So really, an Xbox exclusive really just means Xbox not on PlayStation or on Switch. So like that terminology is already evolving. But for Microsoft, Game Pass is quite literally everything at this point. And so Microsoft is trying to figure out unique and creative ways to grow the Xbox Game Pass subscriber base. They've already told us multiple times, judge us on our Game Pass subscriber revenue, not on our console sales. And that is really critical for two important reasons. The first being that Microsoft says, look, console sales, while important, are not the primary driver of health for this organization. We need to create a subscription service that is a flywheel of revenue that will generate the revenue we need to be able to empower us to build the games that we want to be able to do through our studios and sell them. And so that is one thing. The other thing too is that the console is just another pillar of the overall portfolio. Microsoft actually believes that the gaming on the mobile side has a massive potential, potentially bigger than what we see in the console sales. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about how many phones there are and you see some of those mobile games, they bring in some serious dollars, and that helps justify that nearly $70 billion acquisition to bring Activision on board. So what am I trying to get through here? The point that I'm trying to make is that the concept of an Xbox exclusive is evolving. It is no longer the thing that you grew up with. It's no longer that cartridge that slaps into a Nintendo and that's the only place you can play. Microsoft is starting to look at Xbox publishing as the driver of growth for Game Pass, which is smart, and that's not it's a very obvious statement. But one thing I want to point out is that the console base has a saturation point of how many people can actually pay for Game Pass. Microsoft knows this. They have a lot of economists on staff. They have very smart people over there. They say, look, I'm going to use numbers I'm just making up here, but for illustrative purposes. Let's say we have 100 million consoles active right now. We know through our own research that we can only sell Game Pass to roughly 65%. Once we hit 65%, it's going to be really hard to get the remaining percentage of people into Game Pass. They've hit what we would refer to as the saturation point of Xbox Game Pass on consoles. I don't know if Microsoft has hit that point yet. However, they can very easily forecast the growth of Xbox Game Pass on consoles sold or used versus how the subscription rate is actually selling. So they know roughly when they're going to hit that saturation point. And after the saturation point, it's not that you can't get those people to move over, and you're also going to have churn. It's that the customer acquisition cost of getting those people from the non-paying Game Pass into Game Pass goes up significantly, meaning it costs more money to get people into the service. And so as Microsoft starts to see that inflection point of where the customer acquisition cost will go up, they need to start thinking about how they attract more customers into the ecosystem. And that is where I think we're starting to see things like the PlayStation side. I'm not saying they're bringing Game Pass over. However, if Microsoft can showcase that, like, look, this is a game in Game Pass. This is a game in Game Pass. Hi-Fi Rush and Sea of Thieves and that sort of stuff. They open the base who might be interested in potentially joining Game Pass with an Xbox console in the future. However, in the short term, they can capitalize on revenue gains by just selling the title on these platforms. So my expectation, and maybe not immediately, is that for the long term, we're going to start to see Microsoft once again evolve what Xbox exclusive means. I think it's going to be more of things of like a timed exclusive. Like, hey, you can play Hi-Fi Rush on Xbox Game Pass for 6 months, for a year before it shows up on other platforms. On Call of Duty, you're going to get special camos or skins or other things that are only available on Xbox, but the core game is now going to be on other platforms because it's so expensive to build games. You're talking on the short end, $10 to $15 million for a really small indie title, up to $300 million for that quad A. And to justify those investments, you have to be able to reconcile the fact that, like, we need to be selling this game as broad as possible. Microsoft has noted through their Game Pass model that selling consoles isn't the primary driver of success. It's selling Game Pass subscriptions, which now, as we know, could be on PC and could be on console. And I expect it could be on mobile, right? That's like not a far stretch at all. There's going to be a Game Pass mobile tied into all this and through various methods. The cloud is there already. And so I'm trying to just add some color to why Microsoft is considering doing this, because at the end of the day, Microsoft is a business that is going to make money. Now, you're going to sit here and say, well, then fine, Brett, that's super easy. I'm just going to go buy a PlayStation. And yeah, I may not get them on day one, but I'll eventually be able to get them. However, friends, PlayStation is already doing the same thing. Now, I would say that they're trailing Microsoft. I think Microsoft led the industry in this a little bit here, but it doesn't matter. PlayStation is now starting to bring their games over to the PC as well, which is a really important thing, because you can make the same arguments like, well, I bought a PlayStation to be able to play certain games. Like, well, okay, your best bet, honestly, is just buy a gaming PC, which I have no problem recommending, because you're more than likely going to eventually get most of the games you want to play from PlayStation and Xbox. Granted, it's much more complex on the PC side. You don't get a stable experience, I think, but you can also get a better experience, right? You can get better graphics, you can get more frames per second for sure. However, you've got to be able to tweak and buy hardware, and it's more expensive. I'm not going to go down the console versus gaming PC, but however, PlayStation is doing the same thing that Microsoft is already doing. I'm not saying that we're going to see Xbox and PlayStation start shipping games on both platforms. I will promise you, though, that they have already considered figuring out if they should. Like, bringing a Spider-Man title to Xbox 2 years after it was on PlayStation is, I guarantee, a conversation they had. Because they're like, look, if we put this on Xbox, it would cost us $15 million, I'm making up numbers, to port it, and we think we could make $60 million. Like, that is real money to these companies. You have to remember that these companies are trying to maximize their profits based on the games that they're building. And so it's interesting to see how these two players at the end of the day are going to go forward, because the tribalism between I bought an Xbox console and I bought a PlayStation console, the reasoning you should buy either one is because you just prefer the controller at the end of the day, because the game exclusivity is really starting to kind of melt away. And I think it's going to melt further the farther we go into the future, as these companies try to figure out how to become more sustainable while investing so much money into these devices. And not to mention, consoles look like they might potentially have a longer lifespan going forward. I mean, how many people are still playing Xbox One? They're still shipping old PS4 games and not just PS5 exclusives. And I think when we go to PS5 and PS6 and Xbox Series X and whatever beyond, like that generational cycle is going to drag out even further, which means for companies like Sony and Nintendo and Xbox who make margin eventually on their hardware, it's going to become even harder to sustain these things, because it's like, I'll just play PlayStation 5. I don't need 8K. I have 4K 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second is fine. I don't need 8K 60 on a 1080p monitor. So I'm just trying to add some color about how I think exclusives are really going to evolve here in the industry. And I think people need to just be happy to play the game that they can play. Because at the end of the day, if you're happy playing a game, why would you be annoyed that somebody else can be happy to play the same game? It increases the community. The larger the community of the title that you like playing, increases the odds that the vendor is going to put out more content and create another version at the end of the day. So, that's sort of just trying to add some color. I don't think Xbox fans should be all angry about this. Microsoft is going to continue to support and make the Xbox community have Xbox premium experiences with Xbox Studio titles. I think that is a given. However, don't be shocked if you see Xbox titles start showing up in other places where they haven't previously. So there you go. If you want to make sure you stay updated on everything happening in the world of Xbox and beyond, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.